All right, let's go ahead and get rocking and rolling. Give me 1 second to get my, ooh, excuse me. All right, there we go.
You need a website. Why not do it yourself? With Wix, you can create your own professional website.
All right, let's volume down here. All right, let's go ahead and get this rock and rolling here. All right, welcome, 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 welcome. Disability Talk Live. All right, I want to thank you very much as always and welcome you to another edition of Disability Talk Live. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today was understanding why it takes so long to get your disability benefits. Okay, so let me go ahead and put it here. Understanding, make sure you got here. Make sure you get some using all this fun stuff. Ooh, excuse me. All right, so I want to make sure I get everybody to understand something. When you're applying for disability benefits, at some particular point, if you're fortunate enough to be approved, you now have to wait until you actually get paid. That's the thing that I know, that's the thing that throws a lot of people off, is that, and I want to make sure I walk through this so that you get a better understanding. First and foremost, it's kind of, let me throw out a few things to kind of dispel a few myths. First, when you get approved for disability benefits, Social Security doesn't really have a set period of time for when they actually have to release the money to you. They do process it as fast as possible, but the simple fact of the matter is that a lot of times they don't worry about the things that they need to address from a payment standpoint until you're actually approved. It's amazing the number of times people come to me and they're like, how come Social Security can't tell me how much I'm going to get? Or how come Social Security can't tell me what the back pay is going to be? Because let's be real, they have more time, they have more people they have to deal with who actually are in pay status than to worry about somebody who may not ever get into pay status. So their focus is really more on, let me deal with the people who are in pay status now, as opposed to those people who may be in the future. So let's go down the line. So a couple of things. One, let me clear one little myth out here, because I see Nicholas got his point about pay petitions for lawyers. Paying attorneys is really not something that holds up your disability benefits paying you. I can't even be more bluntly clear about that. Most times what happens is that the systems are set up in such a way so they withhold the 25% that's entitled to the representative off to the side, and then the rest of your money is processed accordingly. The fact that you have a representative and they have to get paid doesn't tie up or slow down a person getting paid. I always tell people that, because I have people all the time, well, they told me the reason why it's taking so long is because they have to pay my attorney first. I said, trust me, my friend, we're telling that to get you off the phone, because in the grander scheme of things, what's getting paid, the systems are set up, whether it be SSI or DIB or whatever the case may be, it automatically takes out that percentage and so forth to hold to the side in case an attorney has to be paid. That has nothing to do with your overall pay. So I throw that out there so that you're aware that sometimes when there's delays in you getting paid, it's because there are things that are non-disability related that have to be taken into consideration before you get paid. Like what? Well, let's say, for instance, Social Security makes a determination that you need to have a representative payee. Let me throw this out here and make this very blunt. If Social Security makes a determination that you need a representative payee, okay, plain and simple, if they make the determination that you need a representative payee, no one gets paid until that determination is made. They don't even get to the rest of that in terms of if there's any offsets or anything like that, or if you owe any monies and so forth. They focus on the fact that if the government or a judge or a decision maker has made the determination that you need to have someone to handle your money for you, until they address that, they do nothing else. Well, what does that mean? Well, what that means is, if they need you to come in to provide them information, whether they need to interview you, whether they need documents from your doctors regarding your ability to handle your own money, or whether or not you would bring in someone who you could provide, until that is addressed first, they won't worry about any of that other stuff. So when you start thinking, why all this other delay is, if there's an indication in your file that they need to determine that you need a representative payee, trust, that has to get addressed first. Okay? All right. So, second thing you need to be mindful of. There are different programs that have different non-disability related things that are pertaining to it. Okay? Let me say this again. There's different disability programs that have different non-disability related things that may apply to them. Okay? So I say that, to throw this out here to you is this. Let's say, for instance, that you apply for a supplemental security income or SSI. Okay? Under the SSI program, they have to determine what your assets and your resources are for each month for the period of time that you were found to be disabled. So guess what? Let's do a simple example. Let's say Social Security found that you were disabled back in, let's say you applied in July of 1st, 2015. And Social Security found you disabled July 1st of 2015. Now, we're now in March of 2017. So let's say in the almost 2 years that you've had this past by, you've had a variety of things happen. You've worked some part-time jobs. You've had a few people give you a couple of dollars. You've rotated from living with your parents to living with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or to living with other family friends. You were homeless. Now, if you listen to that scenario, there's a lot of different things that has occurred during that window. So guess what? They have to do calculations for every month up from July 1, 2015 to the present. So what does that mean? They're going to want to look at what were your finances during those periods of time when you were working part-time, how much money you would make. Do you have copies of the receipts or any of the checks that you received? They want to know when you were living with your parents, were you paying rent? Were you living with your girlfriend, your boyfriend? Were you paying rent or utilities? When people are giving you money, did they give you money every month or did they only give it to you those certain months? And you're sitting there going, God, I can't remember all that. Well, guess what? If you don't remember all that, how do you expect Social Security to know that? That's where you come in. Your responsibility is to provide them the information for each one of those months. So guess what? We're talking July, so we're in March now. We're talking March, April, May, June. So we got 4 months up, so 20 months. You need to be able to account for every one of those months. Every one. In terms of what your finances and your assets are, because Social Security under the SSI program has to account for the amount of money that you received, each one, to determine what the amount of money you're entitled to receive is for each one of those months. And some of you are like, oh my gosh, is it really that serious? Yes, under the SSI program, it is that serious. So if you don't give them a breakdown, or if they need additional information from you for those months, guess what? You seize Nathan no money until they've actually had the opportunity to calculate each one. I say this again, and this is not me trying to be funny. They have to calculate each one. So if they don't have all of the breakdown that they need, that's going to cause a delay. So guess what? When they ask you to provide them copies of the documentation for those months and you drag your feet on it, and then you get mad calling them asking them for a status of when you're going to get paid, and they haven't paid you yet, or they start paying you your monthly benefits going forward because you got that information, but you can't get your back pay released to you. And so then you call your attorney getting mad. I tell people a couple of things. First and foremost, Social Security is responsible for calculating that information. Have you given them everything? And if you haven't, guess what? Guess what? The longer it takes you to provide them the information that they need, the longer it's going to take for them to calculate what you're going to receive. Now, and so when I look at that, I tell people, so guess what? If you're getting monies from other sources during that time period, that's going to reduce possibly what you're going to be getting for SSI as well. So guess what? Let's say, for instance, using Nicholas's example, that he was found disabled for SSI, but he's also getting VA benefits. And like maybe he only just started getting VA benefits in 2016, like let's say October. Well, guess what? They've got to now look and say, how much money are you getting per month in VA benefits? Because guess what's going to happen? The amount of money you get for SSI is going to be reduced by whatever you get from any other program. So that now presents a unique issue, because guess what? If you're getting if they determine you're eligible to receive $730 a month in SSI benefits, but you get $500 a month in VA benefits, guess how much you're going to get? You're probably thinking $1,200. Not. What's going to happen is they're going to reduce the SSI. I keep stressing SSI, supplemental security income, by the $500 that you get in VA benefits. Because why? SSI is a supplemental program. SSD works a little different. SSD, we talked about SSI. Let's move over to SSD. SSD works differently. Let me tell you why it works differently. Because that's what you paid into the system. Okay. Now, when they're looking at it, they're not looking at it from an assets and resources thing like they did with the SSI. With SSD, they're looking at it as anything else is offsettable. And you're like, well, what do you mean by offsettable? Okay, let's pause on this for a second. There are certain programs whereby if you receive monies from those programs may result in a reduction of your SSD benefits. And you're like, such as what? For instance, workers' compensation. Workers' compensation benefits that you receive during the same period of time is not a straight one-to-one reduction, but they do take in consideration the combination of your workers' comp as well as your SSD, coupled with comparing that to 80% of your average current earnings during your work years to determine if you made more in combined disability workers' comp benefits than you did 80% of your average current earnings, and that results in a reduction of your SSD. I know that was rough and dirty, and you're probably saying, I got to rewind that because he said that way too quick. So that's one example. VA benefits. Is your VA non-service or service connected? Why is that important? Because if it's service connected, typically it's not reduced, meaning your Social Security disability benefits, VIB, not SSI, SSD. Your SSD typically is not affected. However, if it's non-service connected, like if you get a disability pension from the VA that's non-service connected, guess what? That is offsettable. That means that could be used to calculate against your SSD. Also, throws a couple other things in mind, because I've seen this happen a few times where I tell people. Social Security has the federal government and their wisdom, when they passed the Social Security Act, included a provision which is called it's what we call the anti-garnishment provision. What that does is that prevents creditors from attempting to garnish any of your Social Security disability benefits as a result of whatever outstanding debts that you owe to the creditors. However, the government did allow for 3 scenarios. Again, the government did allow for 3 scenarios by which they made the determination, that under these 3 limited circumstances, your disability benefits can be garnished. I will tell you this, it's not been my experience where it's SSI was been affected, it's usually SSD. So what are the 3 scenarios? Child support, alimony, federal debt, which includes federal student loans. Okay. Most people, if you owe a tax debt or you haven't paid your taxes, or you have federal student loans, that's coming and so forth. Alimony, I don't see that hit too often. The one that comes up fairly regularly is child support, where I'll get somebody who's like they'll come up to me and they'll say, oh, they're thinking they're getting this big jamming back paycheck, and all of a sudden it gets hit, and they're like, what happened? And I ask them, and they're like, do you have any debts? No. And it's amazing. I always get people when I do this, and it's not me trying to be funny, but I'll say, do you have any debts? No. You have no debts whatsoever? No. No student loans? No. No IRS or anything like you owe any back taxes? No. Alimony? Never married. Do you owe child support? Well, yeah. Booyah. There's the answer to your question. I thought they couldn't garnish. Actually, there is an anti-garnishment provision. They can't garnish except federal debt, alimony, and guess what? Child support. So if you owe child support and you're sitting here thinking in the back of your mind that, oh, I'm disabled, I can't pay it. Okay, well, they can go in and they can take it, and they can come in and they can grab that money that you owe accordingly. Now, what I typically tell people is a couple of things. One, if you have an issue relating to child support, let me say this again. If you have an issue relating to child support, that is a state law issue. That is not a Social Security issue. Okay, so running to Social Security, telling them that they shouldn't garnish this and they shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that. Social Security, that has nothing to do with them. They could really care less because that is not their responsibility. So if you're looking to modify your child support obligation, meaning the arrearages you owe or your monthly future benefits, whatever the case may be, you need to work that out with the child support agencies. Why is that important? Because the child support agencies and Social Security, the systems talk to each other. Okay, they talk to each other, and as long as the state says, "Hey," and that's typically how it goes now. You go into court. There's a child support obligation, either in court or through the agency. The agency puts in the system. They know that you can apply for disability benefits. And guess what? Boom, first dibs. Booyah. Yep, there it is. And now you're just saying, looking like this is just crazy. What happened? And this is why I tell people, be mindful. Be mindful. Another thing that you need to be aware of, this comes up as well. Let's say, and this is not me trying to be funny, but it's real deal. Let's say that you were a guest of this, throw this out here. Let's just say that you were a guest of a city, state, or county government facility for a period of time. And you're like, Attorney Reeves, what are you talking about? Okay, let's say you were in jail and prison. Okay, let's just go ahead and call it like it is. You were in jail and prison for a period of time. And the period of disability that you're alleging also includes a period of time when you were incarcerated. Guess what? For that window of time, you don't get disability benefits. So what does that mean? Well, let's say, for instance, that you applied in July of 2015. Something happens and you end up going to jail between January 1, 2016, and you get out in like October 1 of 2016. And then they found you disabled in March of 2017, going all the way back to July of 2015. In your mind, you're doing the math, and you're trying to calculate the benefits for every one of those months. And all of a sudden, you get your award notice, and it's substantially less than what you thought. And you get hot. And I'm like, oh, well, what happened? Attorney Reeves, they G'd me in some money. Anybody G's me? I'm looking at these very months, and it says 0. Weren't you in jail in those months? Well, yeah, you don't get money when you're in jail. No, you don't. So guess what? During those months when you were incarcerated, you don't get this. You're not entitled to receive disability benefits, nor are they going to compensate you if your period of disability includes a period of time when you were in jail. And it's like, man, oh, I didn't know that. And again, these are the little things that most people don't realize when it comes to why it takes so long for you to get paid. Now, I've done 2 videos of it, and I broke it up into separate portions, but let me kind of throw this out there again, so I can kind of bring it on home a little bit more. Only your money is handled and calculated locally. So you have a local office that's handling it. If you are SSD only, it's a payment center. Now, what happens is that there's 2 types of payment centers. There's payment centers that handle it for persons who are under the age of 54, and then those people who are 54 and older. If you're 54 and older, there's typically regional locations based on where you were born. They're typically where your Social Security was originated. So, for instance, if if your number indicates that you were born in the Southeast, like let's say you were born in Georgia, well, more than likely the Birmingham office is going to be the one that's responsible for it. If you are entitled to receive both the local office and the payment centers both handle payments in terms of calculating your pay. Why is it important to know this? First of all, if it's a local office, here's something that you need to be aware of. They try to move quickly. Most of the offices that I deal with will probably tell you that when they get they got the approval indicating the person should be receiving disability benefits, what ends up happening is they try to see about getting that person in for an interview within 60 days. And then once they get that information and they input that information in, they try to get them in pay status fairly quickly. I'm going to tell you this, and I can't say it any more clearer than this. If there are issues that they need to have addressed, meaning a representative payee, meaning that there are months where you need to provide them documentation regarding the monies that you received, if you were incarcerated, if they have, the more issues they have to address, the longer it's going to take. Also, the greater the backlog they're dealing with, the longer it's going to take. The reality is that, of course, I ain't a lie. When you want your money right now. I got you on that. But the reality is that by the time there's some other people who've been waiting longer, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, you're going to have to wait. With SSD, the one thing that's tough about SSD as opposed to SSI is that with the SSI office, you can go to the local office and deal with the people there. You get a chance to sit down with somebody, and if there's somebody who you can talk to, and they can usually do the stuff right in front of you. SSD is at a payment center. And you may not always get to the person that you want to who's going to handle your money for you. Okay. So they're handling it usually in an out of state, unless you just happen to be living in that state. And so for most times, they're handling, a payment center is actually handling it out of state. Now, it's important to understand, when cases are what we call concurrent, you'll hear sometimes representatives refer to a case as what we call a concurrent case. Okay, and this is not me trying to be funny. This is where you need to understand it. Concurrent cases throw people off all the time. Why do I tell people it throws people off? Because when they're saying concurrent case, what we're saying is that you have two cases. Okay, you have your SSI, you have your SSD, two different areas of responsibility for paying them as handling them. And the two have to talk to each other so that they don't double pay you. So that if by some reason one program trumps the other, they have to work that out so that you get paid exactly what you're supposed to pay, and they don't have to come back behind and try to recoup the money from you later. That is something that they are trying to avoid. They don't want to have to come back and try to recoup money from you later. They want to be able to make the calculations, get the information they need from you, and process that case in an expeditious manner and move forward. If the two offices need to talk to you or talk to each other about something, guess what? The delay with regards to your back pay will be affected until those things are addressed. And here's the other thing that you also need to be aware of. They don't make it a super priority to make certain things happen. What does that mean? Well, let's say, for instance, let's say that the SSD needs to calculate your back pay, but they see in the system that you have to have a determination for representative payee. Guess what? They will do nothing else on that case until the local office tells them if you need a rep payee. So they may calculate the money, but they won't do any movement on it until somebody in the local office makes a determination with regards to that. Now, once that happens, the local office has to notify the payment center. But here, let's be real here. It ain't like somebody gets on the phone and says, yo, Donald, check it. You need to go to my man here because I just determined he didn't need a representative payee. They put something in their system, they alert the payment center, and then somebody at some point in time will come back to check to see if they've received an alert, letting them know that that's taken care of so that they'll know to go on to the next thing. It's just that simple. Okay? All right. Now, you asked the question, Nicholas, what if I got a reduction in VA benefits? Could I still get accepted for SSI even if when I got denied to the amount I got? Good question. All right. This is where it becomes a little tricky. If there's a change in your finance for SSI benefits, let's say you were getting finance. Let's do the math here based on what Nicholas just asked. Let's say, for instance, that Nicholas was receiving $500 a month, and he only gets $200 a month in SSI. But somehow he got a reduction in VA benefits, and now 500 is now 400. Can he go to Social Security and ask for an increase in SSI benefits? What you do is, the short answer is you can go and ask. And if they make a determination that, let's say they made an original determination that you were entitled to receive a maximum amount, and the only thing that's changed from the time that they made the determination is that your VA benefits is lower, then it is very possible that they can make a redetermination that the amount of money you should be receiving should be now 300 as opposed to the 200 you were getting before because you were getting 500 in VA benefits. So let's do the math quick. We're getting VA benefits 500. You were entitled to receive 700 in SSI, but they're only giving you 2 because you're getting 5 in VA. All of a sudden, the VA goes from 5 to 4. Can you go back to the VA? Can you go back to Social Security and ask for that extra $100? Absolutely. Okay. Now, Don asks, he's been on Social Security for a few years and hasn't got a CDR yet. My letter says 7 years. Will it be a short form or long form? I have no idea because it depends on what they ask you for. Okay, and I'm not trying to be blunt when I say that, but I always tell people when they ask me about what is going to happen with a CDR, I said it's one of those wild things you don't know until it gets here, because it's only in their system for how they determine what they're going to do when it gets to that particular point. But I want to go back to what Nicholas brought up, which I thought was awesome, because I want to add another point with regards to the example that he just provided. Let's say, for instance, that when you made your original determination of SSI benefits, that they determined that you're not entitled to receive any SSI. Let's assume this is SSI only. And let's assume that you were getting $800 a month of VA benefits. So then all of a sudden, they determined that you can't receive any money from SSI because You make too much money in VA benefits. A year passes. A year passes. You come back and all of a sudden the 800's been dropped to 6. And you're saying, well, they determined originally I was entitled to receive $700 in SSI, but I made too much. Can you go back and try it then? Absolutely. You could ask for the possibility for expedited reinstatement based on the fact that your financial situation has changed, but be mindful that it might not be reinstated, because what the way Social Security happens is that if your SSI benefits, anytime any benefit program is suspended for like a year or 12 months, after that 12 months, it terminates, which means you have to start over again. So what you need to do is you need to tell them, listen, the only thing that's different is that your SSI determination wasn't terminated because you're medically improved. It terminated because your resources were greater than what you were entitled to receive. As a result, now that your resources has reduced, is it possible for you to receive that additional monies? That's important to understand. So when you find yourself in that situation now, I have had people ask me this question: what if it's VIB SSD? I said, first of all, your SSD rarely goes backwards. So what does that mean? That means if, let's say they made a determination that your SSI, the most you can receive is $700 a month. But then they do a calculation for your SSD and they determine your SSD is $1,200. Guess what? That SSI program is going to disappear. And you say to yourself, what if your SSD goes down? I said, first of all, it doesn't go down. It very rarely goes backwards. I don't think I've ever met anybody where it's gone backwards. It typically either flatline or go up, and then typically go backwards. So it's important though, but also from an SSD standpoint, let's look at it there. Let's look and say some circumstances that occurred. Let's say that you try to work. You find, let's say you go to work, let me kind of go into this as well. You find a job and you're working full time, and all of a sudden Social Security determines that you're basically earning substantial gainful income. Substantial gainful activity. Can you get the word out? Let's just say that Social Security makes a determination that you earn substantial gainful activity, that you basically make enough money that you no longer are eligible to receive disability benefits based on the fact that you're working. Let's say you work for 4 or 5 months and then all of a sudden you stop working. Go back to Social Security and ask them, can they expedite reinstating your disability because you attempted to go to work and your condition got to such a level that you were unable to work and you need benefits to be continued. Boom. Now we're back to square one. Okay. Now, I've given you a mouthful today. We're gonna have to wrap this up because as always, we're shutting this down about 4:30. So we've got about a minute and some change left. It's not trying to be funny, but I cannot stress this enough. Social Security is a funky program. Most people, I always tell, when people come to me, I always tell them, focus on getting Social Security because the payment is the gravy later. There are problems, and this is going to sound trifling when I say this, so please do not be offended when I say this. There are some problems that are good to have. When you're sitting there waiting for benefits and you've lost your house, you've lost your car, you've lost so much. I know that's hard to hear, especially when you've been sitting in the system for a couple of years waiting, and when you finally get your benefit, you finally look like you're at the end of the tunnel, and you finally look like you're trying to get some measure of relief. The last thing you want to hear is some rat mouth attorney telling you that this is a good problem to have. I said, well, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. It really is, because I need you to understand, if you've been approved, you're going to get something. It's just that you got to give them the time to calculate. Because if your case, let's say your case is a long one, like I had a case the other day where it was one of those funky fly cases where I had been in it for years, and when they approved them, it was SSI only, so the lady literally had to do manually SSI back pay for like 6 years. So that means she had 72 months that she had to address every finance for each month. So you got to give them the chance to work it out accordingly. I know that's not fair, and I know that you're thinking to yourself, why don't they just have this information ready? Because the reality is they don't know what they're going to, when it's not in pay status, they don't worry about all that. Once it gets into pay status, then they can start calculating that information accordingly. Okay, so with that being said, here's a quick summation. Remember this: when you have been approved, I cannot stress this enough. Wait until, once you've been approved, give Social Security the opportunity to work through the system. And for those of you who are out there, if you're looking at trying and you're still waiting to get approved and you're needing resources, let me tell you something. If you haven't had a chance, I want you to check out my man, Jonathan Ginsberg, the Social Security disability videos. he and I both, there's a couple of attorneys out there, reps who have them, but I've surfed YouTube like most attorneys who troll, try to see what your competition does and so forth. He and I have probably, I would probably venture to say, and this is just me being arrogant, probably a very large volume of videos that you can go through. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to, get resources and information in order to get as much knowledge as you're going through the process, check out my videos. I got a bunch, and I know he has a bunch as well. And if you have any questions, I know if you reach out to him directly, he gives a lot of personal contact information, so you can reach out to him. And I do the same as well. So hope you enjoyed the videos. And as always, my pleasure. Stay out of trouble and have a wonderful day.